Good evening and welcome to Voters Decide, the Hispanic Vote 2024. I'm Eliott Rodriguez from CBS News Miami, and tonight I'm at Florida International University for this town hall, which we have been working on very hard with our news partners at the Miami Herald, El Nuevo Herald, Univision 23, and South Florida's WLRN. We're excited about this event, and we have some people here gathered at Florida International University who are very eager to delve into the issues focusing on the Hispanic vote in this election year. I'd like to start out by introducing our distinguished panelists. We have 5 panelists who are going to help me out here. First, starting with former GOP congressional candidate Irina Vilariño. She is a businesswoman. Her family owns the Las Vegas Cuban cuisine restaurants and employ some 300 people, close to that amount. We have Democratic strategist Jose Parra. He is a partner with global strategic communications advisory firm FGS Global. Jose has served as senior advisor to former Democratic Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Political science professor Eduardo Gamarra from FIU is here. He's done extensive polling of Hispanic voters in the United States. Radio host Ninosca Perez Castellón. She is the host of Ninosca en La Poderosa and is a longtime voice of Cuban exiles in South Florida. Finally joining us, Democratic pollster Fernand Amandi. He is managing partner of Bendixson and Amandi, a Miami-based public opinion research and strategic communications consulting firm. Now here's a look at the strength and importance of the Hispanic vote as we get started here going into the election. At a national level, the Pew Research Center says that Hispanic voters represent 50% of the total growth in eligible voters between 2020 and now. Hispanic voters are projected to account for 14.7% of all eligible voters in November, which is a new high, and in Florida, 22% of eligible voters are Hispanic. And we're going to start our conversation talking about the southern border, which is an issue that many point to as the most important issue facing the country right now. It isn't in the survey that FIU did with Hispanics, but it is something that's very concerning to Hispanics, so that's where I want to start out. FIU's Jack D. Gordon Institute for Public Policy conducted a Hispanic public opinion survey asking this question: what is the principal threat to the national security of the United States? While the majority, 17% surveyed, said they don't know, the second largest percentage of people, 11.5%, said it's an open border and immigrants not being vetted. So with that in mind, let me ask the first question, and I would like to ask this question to Professor Gamarra. The FIU survey found that the #1 issue for Hispanics this election cycle is inflation and the economy. No big surprise there, right? But when asked what is the biggest national security threat facing the country, Hispanics in this survey said it's the southern border and immigration. That, I must say, I found a bit surprising, being the son of immigrants who came to this country seeking a better life in the United States, because many of the respondents are themselves people who came across the border. How do you explain this fear immigrants have of fellow immigrants? Professor?
It's a very interesting question, and one that we've really grappled with, because one would assume, right, that that immigrants would be really in favor of bringing their relatives and so on and so forth. But what we're explaining it from the perspective of kind of a sociological concept, right? We're calling it the ladder approach to, and it's somewhat along the following lines, that there's this perception among those who are here that the boat is full, and will the last person please pull up the ladder, right? And what we're finding increasingly, both in polls and in other more qualitative kinds of studies, is this deep distinction between those who are here and who have been here for a while and those who are arriving. And it isn't a new phenomenon. For example, we found it during the Mariel boat lift. I worked during the Mariel boat lift with Marielitos, and we found it in terms of trying to relocate Marielitos into Miami. And there was this enormous rejection of Marielitos because they had come with this enormous stigma from Cuba, and they were re-stigmatized when they came here. That's what's happening in the United States today. And so we find, a phenomena like a president, a former president, coming to the most Hispanic city in the United States and essentially announcing the massive deportation of undocumented aliens. He called them something else, but the whole issue is that that was a very well-received idea. Many of the people in the audience were probably Marielitos, were probably at some point in their lives, at least when they came across the border, undocumented.
Okay, well, I was here as a journalist covering the Mariel boat lift. It's been a long time, but we have somebody here who actually came to this country on the Mariel boat lift. And Irina, your family is the quintessential American success story, right? You came here on the Mariel boat lift, started a successful business, and you lived the American dream, right? How is it that maybe some of our fellow Hispanic immigrants and voters who came that way don't feel the same way about new immigrants crossing the border, seeking a better life and opportunities in this country?
With all due respect, I'd like to refute the professor's latter approach. The problem, I am a Marielita, I'm a proud Marielita. The problem with the Mariel boat lift was that Cubans had the most successful exile ever in the history of the United States as far as production and assimilation into American economy and society. Fidel Castro astutely imported or inserted over 10,000 common criminals into that exile in order to tarnish our name. So it's not that the traditional exile community stigmatized us for not being great people. It's simply that he literally put awful human beings into these boats to arrive to the United States and tarnish our good name. And I also refute the idea because I think that Hispanics, and I speak from my Cuban community personally, we left Cuba, but we never forgotten Cuba. And we have never forgotten our family members in Cuba. And every time that we've had the possibility of bringing them legally to this country, we have done so. Simply, we had the opportunity to come to this country, and I think it behooves us to conserve this country. None of us on this panel or on this, in this room sleep with our doors open. None of us do. We all protect our homes. And by nature, the country is an extension of our home, and it must be protected. The same as when we jump on a plane, we get patted down. Everybody wants to make sure that we're going to fly with respectable human beings. We want good people to come to the United States. I am not against immigration. On the contrary, we need great immigration. We need great immigration for our businesses, for our economy, and to give others that don't have a great country politically or a stable country to come to this country and live a better life.
Okay, let me ask Jose Parra. Do you see a contradiction here where you have Hispanics who maybe came in a way where folks weren't vetted and now saying, oh no, we can't allow people who aren't vetted coming into the country?
There's definitely a contradiction, but I do agree with Dr. Gamarra that there's this syndrome of let's pull the ladder behind us. However, I'd like to point out to a Pew study that, now that you talked about the Pew study, the Pew Center, that came out last week, I believe, that showed that on immigration, Hispanics nationally, I haven't seen the surveys specifically on Florida, but nationally have a much more nuanced view of immigration. While 75% do feel that there's a crisis at the southern border, when you look at enforcement-only proposals, they tend to disagree less with that. Only a third of Hispanics agree with enforcement-only proposals compared to 55% of the population. When you ask them about other solutions, such as putting more judges at the border, putting more asylum personnel that can process the applications and get these cases through the door much faster, they agree with that. And so it's a question also of the perception that people are seeing at the border. The other problem is the perception of crime, that there has been a demonizing effect from certain quarters with these immigrants, saying that they bring crime to the country, when actually they're 60% less likely to commit a crime than native-born Americans. So all these effects, I think, have had a point to hurt the view of Hispanics with current immigrants. But I don't think it's something that it's unsurmountable when you look at it from the national level.
There is a feeling that Hispanics are being demonized, that immigrants are being demonized, and we're going to delve into more of that. But right now we have a question from Jenny Padura from Univision 23. Jenny?
Hi, Eliott. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. So let's continue talking about that, because recently the mayor of Hialeah said that the city is facing a real challenge due to the amount of migrants arriving to the city in terms of resources. So how do you guys think the crisis at the border is going to impact the Hispanic vote specifically in this election?
Ninoska, you want to take a crack at that?
Well, I think getting back to the effect of the latter, I think that as a Cuban, for us, migration has been every time that a group has come, like when the '94 crisis, they were taken to Guantanamo and then they were vetted. When there were 10,000 Cubans stranded all over the world, and I was in the foundation and we brought them in, my proudest moment was at the White House when we signed for a document that we were responsible for their care, for their health insurance, and for settling them. And what is happening now is that you see cities like New York, and veterans are protesting because they're not getting the treatment they should, or the same putting migrants in school. And people are scared. The other day I was watching the New Hampshire primary, and there's this lady saying that the reason she's not voting for Biden is the border. And I said, how many immigrants are in New Hampshire? She says, because of the fentanyl crisis and the addiction.
It's certainly an issue all over the country.
So it is an issue. But getting back to the fact that a city like Hialeah, 425,000 Cubans have crossed the border alone. In 2 years. In 8 years of Cubans arriving from Cuba right after the revolution, it was only 250,000. That gives you an idea of how difficult it is right now for any city, because with Mariel, people didn't want them here because there were a lot of crimes, because as Irina said, they were criminals that Castro had sent over. So a lot of them were sent out of the state to camps. A lot of them ended up in prison. But in the end, people were scared because there was crime.
Let me get Fernan to chime in. This is such a big issue nationwide, the southern border, and what light is this painting Hispanics in this country, immigrants?
Well, it's not a question of how it's painting Hispanics, Eliott. It's how it's painting the Republican Party, that has now definitively, before the eyes of the world, shown their cynicism on this issue of immigration. A lot of the rhetoric, some of which we've heard up on the stage, echoed by the Republican Party platform on solving the crisis at the border, doing something about immigration. There was a Senate bill that was put together in a bipartisan fashion, led by Mitch McConnell. Paul Lankford was ready to go to the president's desk and be signed to finally address this situation. And who came out and said, we're not doing this bill? Donald Trump, the Republican nominee in waiting, who said for political considerations, unwilling to give Biden the actual ability to say we've tried to address this problem, now makes it a political football.
One quick follow-up, but what about President Biden not signing executive orders that Trump had in effect when he was in office?
Many of the policies that Trump actually put into place, President Biden continued at the border. He is now looking at the option of executive orders because he was trying to have this situation litigated where it should have been litigated, in the Congress, with a legislative action to add more border security, more agents for processing, more judge, more folks to understand the process of asylum, which is the very benefit that Irina's family, Ninoska's family, and my family came through. By the way, thank the Democratic president, President Carter, that allowed you in.
I have no problem giving
Thank the Democratic President Kennedy, who let my parents and grandparents into this country. There is a way to solve this responsibly when we cool down the rhetoric and deal with it with policy, Eliott. The problem is today's extreme MAGA Republican Party refuses to.
But even before this, Congress has been reluctant to take this issue head on, has been reluctant for many years. I know you guys want to chime in, but we need to take a commercial break. Let's take a short break. When we come back, the race for the White House in 2024 looks like it'll be a repeat of 2020 with Joe Biden running against Donald Trump. What do Hispanics think of the matchup? We'll talk about that when we come back.